Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope everyone is doing good. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about a very requested topic and something that everyone was questioning me and asking me about. That was difference between New Zealand and Canada, and why did I choose New Zealand PR over Canadian PR. So the first and the foremost thing that I want to tell everyone whosoever is watching this video is that I hold both Canadian residency and New Zealand residency, and I have lived in both the countries. So whatever I'm talking about in this video are my personal thoughts and are my personal views, and my decision to move back to New Zealand were based on these points. Please don't criticize on the fact that I am talking negative about one country and highlighting the positives about one country. That's not the intention of today's video. This video is to tell you guys the reasons why I decided to come back to New Zealand and not live in Canada. And I also wanted to show you my Canadian resident visa and my New Zealand resident visa. So for whosoever wants to actually see, so this is my New Zealand resident visa, and this is my Canadian resident visa. So whosoever is wondering, yes, I do have residency of both the countries. However, now I had already decided to come back to New Zealand, so I'm not going to fulfill all the conditions for the Canadian resident visa requirements, which is to stay there for 2 years to actually convert your visa into a permanent resident visa. So I've given up on that. Now when that's done, and now let's just come back to the video, and now we are going to talk about the points and discuss some questions that you had asked me on my previous videos. So let's just get started. So the first and the foremost reason, or the first most important thing that made me think of coming back to New Zealand was the Canadian weather. As you guys all are aware of the fact that Canada is known for like really cold winter weather. That is something that I was also aware of before I decided to go to Canada, but I never thought that it's going to be that cold. I moved to Toronto and we moved in March, so it was more of a spring season, the beginning of a spring season, and I thought that the weather is going to be all right. People who live there just get used to the weather. That is what I thought that I would also get used to. But once I moved there and lived there for a few months, I really thought that the winters were really cold. Obviously the winters are going to be cold, but it was really cold. We had some ice storms and really cold days in the month of March there and April. Although it was not their winter season, but I thought that even the spring was really cold there. So the weather in Canada could be really harsh, and if you are not a big fan of cold winters or in general cold weather, then Canada could not be the place for you. Whereas if you compare New Zealand weathers, similar to Canada, we have got all the 4 seasons here. We've got summer, spring, autumn and winters. The winters are also cold in New Zealand, but it's not as harsh as Canada. Winters are cold, but we don't have snow. Like, we have snow in the extreme southern part of New Zealand. Not all the cities get snow here in New Zealand. So as I said, that winters or the cold weather was one of the biggest reasons I moved back to New Zealand, because if you have snow for most of the months of the year, then I think your natural everyday life gets affected by that, and that's what I experienced there. Maybe people who have been living there for years, maybe they don't get affected by the weather, but because I had lived in New Zealand before moving to Canada, I actually thought of that every single day. If I wouldn't have lived in New Zealand, maybe I wouldn't have, but because I've seen New Zealand weather, I preferred it over Canadian weather. Next, a reason that made me move back to New Zealand was the cost of accommodation. Now you know that in New Zealand or in Canada, different types of accommodation available. To rent, you have options like you can rent a condo, you can rent a house, you can rent an apartment, you can actually rent a basement in Canada. We don't have basements in New Zealand, but you can rent a basement in Canada. So when we were looking for a house, or say a basement to start with in Canada, the normal pricing for a basement was somewhere around more than like $800 a month to $1,200, even more than that. And whereas if you compare that price to New Zealand, you can actually rent a house starting from $1,000 to $1,100 a month. So when I was comparing both the accommodation prices, I was thinking that, you know, in New Zealand I could actually rent a whole house in $1,200, whereas if I'm looking for a decent basement, I have to actually pay nearly $1,000 to get a basement for rent. Whereas if I had to get a whole house to rent, I think I had to pay or shed like $2,000 per month from my pocket. So the cost of accommodation was pretty high in Canada, whereas in New Zealand you can actually rent like decent houses at decent prices. The cost of accommodation was another big factor that I saw when I was comparing both the countries. The third reason that I would like to highlight was actually affording a car. I've had a car in New Zealand and I went and bought a car in Canada. So buying the car, the process was easy in both the countries. Car prices were kind of similar. Buying a car wasn't like more expensive in Canada, whereas I feel that the big luxury cars are cheaper in Canada as compared to New Zealand. The thing that I want to talk about is the car insurance. The car insurance prices are way more higher in Canada as compared to New Zealand. Like for example, I want to tell you that how the prices for insurance differ. I lived in Brampton for like 3 months, and the first car that I bought in Canada was my Chevrolet Cruze. I think paid like $11,000. Like I bought it from the actual car dealer, and then when I went, like before buying a car in Canada, you need to have a car insurance, which is different from New Zealand. You need to, like in New Zealand, you can buy a car and then buy yourself an insurance, whereas in Canada, you need to have an insurance before buying a car. So before, actually I went to the dealer, I fixed up everything. I thought of what car I needed, and you know, I had figured out everything. But then I went to buy my car insurance. So now, because I was living in Brampton, and when I contacted different companies for car insurance, I found out that the prices for car insurances were way more higher in Canada as compared to New Zealand. The reasons that were highlighted and were given to me when I was buying the car insurance were as such that, first of all, that Brampton is more of an accident-prone area. Second, the weather. Because of the weather and because of the snow and the ice storms that they get, there are more accidents that happen in Canada, and hence the car insurances are way more higher in Canada as compared to New Zealand. And the third thing was there are different factors that the car insurance prices depend on. For example, your age, how long you've held your license for. So now coming back to the car that I was buying, and depending on the price of the car and everything, all the factors that I mentioned earlier, I was paying $500 a month for owning a normal standard car. It wasn't like a big luxurious car, and it wasn't like a very cheap car as well. So I thought that $500 for a car insurance was way more higher, whereas for a similar car like this in New Zealand, I was just paying like $110. So that's a big difference. And I also got in touch with many of my friends who were living in Canada, and they said that they were also paying somewhere around minimum of $300 to a maximum of $600 a month for car insurance. And I thought that if you are not earning really well, I think shedding like $500 from your pocket every single month on car insurance was way more higher or way more difficult to afford. So that was another thing. Another thing was that the difference of the pay rates. Now when I was in New Zealand, I was doing a decent job. I was earning fine, enough to actually have a good living, and enough to afford myself and my family. So that was doing really well. But when I moved to Canada, I found out that the jobs were paying less, or in general, because their base pay rates are less than New Zealand, the pay rates were really low. And it doesn't matter if your pay rates are low, but I found out that the cost of living in Canada was, if not more, was similar to one in New Zealand. So if you are earning less and your cost of living is similar or more than here, I think it was just like difficult to have like a normal or an easy living there. Don't take me wrong, like for example, if you're moving from India and you're just like earning $14 an hour, and you are doing a decent job, you are a single person, you don't have much expenses to bear and everything as such, then I think living a normal life is okay. But if you have a whole family to take care of, and then you are earning less, and then you have say $1,200 to pay for the rent of a basement, and then all the other things, then I thought that New Zealand was cheaper in that perspective. The thing, I also saw that the cost of groceries were similar in New Zealand and Canada. Like for example, the cost of milk, pastas, bread, everything was similar. So there was not a much of a difference. Whereas before I was moving to Canada, I had heard people saying that the groceries were way more cheaper in Canada in compared to New Zealand, but it was nothing like that. I thought that the prices in grocery stores were similar. Another thing that I saw was the phone plans. Now when I went there and I had a phone, so I wanted to buy myself a plan. So I bought a plan with the Fido. It's been long, I don't remember. I bought a plan with the company, and then I was paying $50. I actually bought the SIM and the plan for $50, and actually I got free standard minutes to another Fido number, or I think I got 2 GB of data in $50 a month. And at that time, I was thinking that in New Zealand, I'm with a company and I'm paying $29 for 5 gigabytes of data, unlimited text and minutes to Australia and New Zealand, and many other benefits. So comparison, I thought that the phone plans in Canada are expensive to that in New Zealand. I think way more expensive, because I was getting less data, less minutes, and less text in almost double the price I was paying in Canada than New Zealand. And that was another difference. Now another thing, like if you are well settled, like if you are moving as a permanent resident to any of the countries, your first aim is to get a good job, and the second aim is to buy a property. Now when I moved to Canada, I thought that that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look for a good job, and then when I get a good job, I'm just going to look into buying a property, because having a family, you don't want to waste all your money on paying rents for basements or houses. So I thought that's what my plan is going to be. But when I was looking at property prices in Brampton or Mississauga, I was really shocked, or I was really surprised that the property prices were really, really high, like really high. Like for example, if you wanted to buy a standard house in Brampton, you would be paying like nearly $800,000 for a standard house in Canada. And if you wanted to buy a luxurious house, or maybe even a good house, you would be paying like nearly $1 million easily. Whereas in New Zealand, although I used to say that properties in New Zealand are very, very high, oh my god, it's so difficult to buy a house in New Zealand. Whereas when I compared it, the prices of buying a property in New Zealand were less. Now, property prices can vary from suburbs to suburbs and cities to cities. Like in New Zealand, Auckland and Christchurch and Wellington are big, like considered as big cities. In Auckland, in many suburbs, the property prices could be to $1 million or even more than that. Whereas in Christchurch, you can buy a standard good house for $600,000. So that was a big low in the property prices. Another thing that I thought that New Zealand was better in that aspect, that I didn't have that much of money to spend on a house, so and I wanted to have a standard good house. So that was something that I thought, of course I can't buy a property in Canada or Brampton, because that was too much of money to spend on a property. So that was that. Now I think the one good thing that I really liked about Canada was that the food was really cheap. Not the groceries, but in general the street food, like Indian food. Like if you wanted to go and eat in a restaurant, I thought that was really, really cheap. You could like easily afford yourself a good meal, like good Indian meal in like $30. Whereas in New Zealand, that is very, very expensive. Like you can easily pay like $70 to $100 for two people for a good standard meal. So that was really good about Canada. And another thing that is that I noticed was that public transport is slightly cheaper and more convenient in New Zealand. I think you can put it on the reason that New Zealand is a small island, whereas Canada is a big country. So the distance you have to commute every single day is much more in Canada than in New Zealand. So you have to change, like before I bought a car in Canada, obviously I was using public transport. So getting from one place to another, I was changing like 2-3 buses every single day. So I was paying more money, and I was spending more time in the buses on the roads, and I was paying more money into public transport than I pay in New Zealand, because obviously, as I said, that New Zealand is a small island, so you don't commute for longer distances every single day, which in a way I like it, because who wants to spend more time on the roads every single day? Like in Canada, I was nearly spending 1 hour before and after work every single day, just to get to work and come back home. And whereas in New Zealand, I think the maximum I have driven or travel is like nearly 30 minutes, or to a max of 35 minutes. So that is what I like, because then I'm not wasting much time on the roads every single day. These are all of the points that I wanted to discuss in this video. There's nothing else that I can think of. Now, just saying that whatever I have told you guys in this video is that all my opinions. These are all my thoughts, and this is all what I have seen or have experienced. In no way I'm saying that Canada is bad or New Zealand is bad, or Canada is good or New Zealand is good. Both the countries are really, really good. If I am saying that I don't like cold weather, maybe you may like cold weather, so I'm just telling you what I think I liked and what I didn't like. So don't so just write like negative comments underneath the video and say that you're just talking bad about Canada. No, I'm not doing that. I was asked all of these things because for someone who's moving to Canada from New Zealand, or from Canada to New Zealand, they always want to know that what they would be looking forward to, or what it is like in the other country, and vice versa. So this video is for everyone out there who is making a move or is thinking of making the move. So just think of these points, or just research on these points before you actually move. Now I'm gonna just end this video, and I hope you liked today's video. If you have any other video suggestions or any questions regarding this video, you can just write it down in the comment section. I would try to answer all your questions and queries. And if you have any questions regarding Canada, like how I applied for Canadian residency, or New Zealand, that how did I get my New Zealand residency, you can just write in the comment section. I would love to make a video on that as well, because I think some of you guys may be also interested that how did I get my Canadian residency when I was living in New Zealand as a permanent resident, that how did I apply for my Canadian residency from New Zealand. If in case anyone is willing to move to Canada, or if anyone is wondering that how did I get my New Zealand residency very quick, you can pop out your queries or requests down below. I would love to make a video on that as well. So on this note, I'm just going to end today's video, and I hope you liked today's video. And if you did, please like and share this video, and please subscribe to my channel so I can make such informative videos for you guys in future as well. And until then, take care of yourself, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye bye.